Hi, welcome back. Let's take a look now at how to develop this formula so that it reports automatically in your gradebook view. So on this screen, I've gone to Manage Grades, and I'm going to click on New Item. Now, similarly to a text item that you will have, and Mary O'Neill is going to show you how to import the student ID numbers into a text field. The formula grade similarly does not affect the averages that you've created for different assignments and categories, so it won't alter that at all. But we have to create it based on some of those other things. So it's important that before you begin this process, you have all of your ticket out the door quizzes created and they exist in your gradebook as items so that the formula grade can pull from them. So from this screen, with that completed, we'll click on Formula. And we're just going to call this one TOD number IC5. And I'll give a short name. I just will give the same. And for the description field, I do think it's a really good idea to put in a description there and then check the box here that will allow the users to view it. So I've created a description for the students to be able to see this, and I've clicked the checkbox here that allows them to see this passage so that they know what they're looking at when they view their grades. The maximum number of points, as I mentioned, is only going to be 5. I don't want it to show more than 5 because I don't want students to feel like they need to do more than 5. If they hit 5, it's only going to show 5. And now here comes the tricky part. We are going to edit the formula in the formula editor. So we have to create a formula. So let's click here, and probably best to watch this a couple times and sort of understand what's happening before you begin to create this formula on your own. So let me open this up, and before I begin creating this formula, if you already have a pretty good understanding of Excel and you know the formulas if and sum, then this is going to be a lot easier for you. If you're not sure about Excel formulas, this is going to be a little bit tricky. I do encourage you to keep at it and use the validate, which I'll talk about in a minute, to make sure that you're building the formula correctly, because it does save a lot of time at the back end. So like I said, if you can just kind of get the general idea, understand the process, and really focus in on how I'm creating it here before then you look at your own grade book and start to work on it, I think you'll be more successful. So let's build this formula. Now, a couple of things that will be specific to my case, and you can alter them. You can tweak this in the formula for how you have your TOD set up, but you'll need to know that I am operating with these assumptions. Students have to get the answer correct. They have to have the correct answer. So for me, I don't give partial credit, and if they get it wrong, they have 3 attempts to get it right, but I would rather have them work at it until they have the right answer instead of just going on thinking, well, I just clicked the button. So that's the first thing. They have to get the right answer. The second thing for me is that I have the ticket out the door set up to be out of 10 points. I'm not sure how that randomly defaulted to 10, but I've just stuck with it. So depending on how you have those variables for your class, that's going to influence a little bit on the formula. And I'll help you develop it depending on your particular situation. But for me, those are 2 things to keep in mind. So I'm going to start with a function. So I'll come down here to the function drop down, and I'm going to say sum and click the start button. So now that's going to open up the formula to be a sum. Now what I'm going to have it do is add together all the correct ticket out the door attempts. So I have to have the formula look to see, did they get the ticket out the door correct? And if so, I want to give them a point. They get 1 credit for that quiz. And if they didn't get a correct answer, they're going to get a 0 for that attempt. So I'm going to build that with an if formula. So I will come to the formula, the function again, and then I'm going to choose if and start. And now I'm going to put in my specific ticket out the door quizzes. And they're all going to be listed here. You'll see them all listed here. Okay. I use a short name, and I have a little convention that I use, which is instructional cycle, week, and then date, because that's how we build our quizzes: cycle 5, week 3, March 7th. So that's what I just have listed as the short name. If you don't have a short name, you're going to see the entire quiz name pop up in this drop down. But I have a short name, and I know that I'm going to be looking for all of the quizzes that have 5s, because those are the instructional cycle 5 ticket out the door quizzes. So I'm going to come up to my formula, and in this if statement, I need to put in parentheses what I want it to examine. Okay, so if, and then I'm going to open parentheses, and I can click it on the keyboard, or I can use this little button down here, but keyboard's just fine. So I'll start the parentheses, I'll come to the select a grade item and choose my first ticket out the door for instructional cycle 5, and I want it to say points received, and I'll say insert. So it comes up with that specific quiz and value assessment, and the next thing that I'm going to do is say, did that equal 10? And then I'm going to close my parentheses. Okay, so it says, if this quiz value was 10, all right, that's the if statement. And it asks that question, if it was 10, and then my if formula, I have to put a comma, all right? If it was positive, if it was true, it's going to give them 1 point, all right? And if it was negative, if they didn't have 10, they will get a 0. Okay, so here's the if statement. If this quiz has points received 10, give the student 1. If they didn't have that, it gets 0. All right, so that's my first if function, and I'm going to end that function down here with the end button. Okay, so now I've got sum, open brackets, and then my if function is the first thing, and I've got the brackets around the function for if, and now I'm back to the sum function. So I'm going to need to put a comma because I'm separating all the functions that I'm adding, right? So now I'm going to do the second ticket out the door quiz as I did with the first. So go to my sum, if, start, open parentheses to say what am I looking at, and I'm going to be looking at the second ticket out the door quiz, points received, insert, did that equal 10? That's what I'm looking at, so I close parentheses, right? That's what I'm looking at. And then comma, because that's the end of the first part of my if function. So if it was true, 1. If it was false, 0. And then close that if function. Okay, so now I've done 2 ticket out the door quizzes, and I'm going to continue this through all of my ticket out the doors for instructional 5. So let me pause while I do that real quick. Okay, so I have all of my ticket out the doors in their if statement, looking if, and then adding all of those individual attempts together. And I want to validate to make sure that I have not added a stray comma or forgotten a parentheses. So I can click this validate button, and if it comes back with this blue statement, then I'm golden. That's exactly what I want. But inevitably, there's always something. So when that comes back incorrectly, you'll have a red error message that says you have an unbalanced expression, and whatever is wrong will be read in the formula itself. So I'm going to show you. I've got my cursor blinking right here, and I'm going to add an additional parentheses. So now you see this right here is incorrect, and if I run the validate, it'll come back and say there's an unbalanced parentheses, and you really kind of have to scan to find where is that, and then you'll see it here. Now here's what's not fun. Inevitably, the mistake is somewhere in the middle, and you can't just put your cursor here and click. Would that you could, but you cannot. So you have to use these arrow buttons to go one entry at a time. So I have to click this for one entry at a time. It's not for characters, so it'll take like that whole quiz as a single entry. So I'll have to go watch that cursor move slowly through the formula to get to the place where I have that incorrect expression, which is right here. And then when I get to that spot, I'll click backspace and it'll take that one thing out. So I'll then validate, make sure it's good. It's all good. And now I'm going to insert that. So I'm going to click this insert button. So that's the hard part. But if you've made it through that, it's smooth sailing from here. So the last thing I'm going to do here at the bottom is change some of the display options, because I don't want this to show as a grade. I don't want them to see, 1 out of 5, F. I don't want them to see that. So I'm going to override that option, and I do not want it to show as a grade symbol or a color. Now I actually add the color in at the end of the instructional cycle, so they'll see red if there's a problem. But for right now, all I want is the points grade. I just want it to show what they have over 5, so that ratio. And for managing view, I've done the same thing here. I just want to see that as a points grade. I don't want to see any grade value, numeric or like percentage or alphabetic grade. I don't want to see that. So now I've got that done, and I'm going to save and close. Okay, so here I am back over in my gradebook view, and I'm going to point out here, these are my Paths to Mastery quizzes for this instructional cycle, and I've had 5. And for my ticket out the door credits, you can see that it's adding these up. So this first student has 10, 20, 30, 40, so 4 out of 5. Notice that this student has 1, 2, 3 successful attempts, but had 1 incorrect attempt, so it's only giving credit for 3. And one of the things that I'll do is send an email out that says, you missed this ticket out the door quiz on this date, but the password was this. I mean, they already came, they've already gotten the credit for the password. I just want them to know that they didn't get the answer right, they need to go back. And that will continue to be something that I'll look at as we get closer to the end of the instructional cycle. But this ticket out the door column now is just continuing to add up as the students take their quizzes. So that's the first half of the Paths to Mastery grade. And then the other half, of course, is how to add up the assignments. And I'll show you how to do that in another video. But you can just use this as a simple way to create that ongoing tally. And it's been really helpful. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from my students that they know exactly where they stand with the ticket out the door quizzes, because they the first semester didn't know how many they had, they didn't know how many they needed, but it's always there in their grade book. It shows right there how many they need to do and how many they have done. So I hope this helps you too.